Hello, and welcome to the Easy Coach. It's good to see you all. Thank you for coming. I'm Ethan Evans. I'm the Easy Coach, and tonight we're going to talk about mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching. The differences and when you want each, and how to get the most from each type of person. Before we do that, I want to just ask you, you should see our question and answer widget on the screen if you're watching on the web. If not, shortly here in chat, the link will show up where you can go out onto a web page and enter questions. But we use the question and answer widget to know what you would like to talk about. So if you're watching on Twitch, you should see a little thing where it says ask a new question. But within that, you can also vote on questions. It's all free. You just need to log into Twitch or go to our attendant webpage. Awesome, Dave. Can you pop the webpage link? And if you go to either of those, you can upvote the different questions that are in the list. And I would love to have your feedback so that we know what you'd like to talk about tonight. So second thing I always say, just so everyone knows, when I'm here talking, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not representing Twitch or Amazon. If you have questions about Twitch or Amazon specifically about their businesses, please put those through the regular channels for those businesses, because that's not what we do here. Here at the Easy Coach, I'm trying to help you develop your career and be successful, because the world needs more great leaders. And I'm hoping you can become those leaders and solve some of the many problems in business and in the world. So with that, the other thing I'll say is if you're working in the question widget, we'll probably end up tonight with a little bit of Ask Me Anything at the end, where we'll throw the floor open to any question about career development after we've covered mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship. So I always tend to open with a story, and I thought tonight I'd talk a little bit about my own mentors. And I was thinking about a couple of my mentors have been bosses. So an interesting question I can speak to a little bit is, how do you turn a manager into a mentor and an advocate? Because I think a lot of people struggle with their managers, and I haven't always had perfect relationships with managers, but my career has surged forward the most when I have had managers who were my advocates. And I know I have some people on this stream that have struggled with their managers, feeling that their managers are undermining them. So when their managers are undermining them, that's really tough. How do you get around that? Well, with my first manager, she came in to the company I was at, my first mentor. She came in and took over from a guy I liked, who I had a good relationship with, but she came in and took over from an outside space. She didn't really know our business. And so I didn't have a thought to make her an advocate or to make her into my mentor. What I did instead was I just thought, well, I got to help this lady understand what's going on. And to be frank, I was full of myself. And if she were on the stream tonight, she'd chime in and said, yes, I was. But I started educating her on how our business worked, and specifically the technology we were managing. And I invested a lot into it, and that really won me some appreciation, I think, and also established my credibility and built that relationship. And for the next several years, she really poured that back into me. Advice on what I was doing well, called me out on some things I did poorly, and when it came review and paycheck time, certainly supported me there. And I think over a 3-year period, my comp went up at least 50, 60% under her leadership. And that was certainly, I was earning it, but also I was being given opportunities. So what's the point there? You can turn a boss into a mentor by building a mentor-style relationship. And the key point you'll hear from me over and over tonight is I invested first. So it's a little bit like Han shot first. I invested first. And I completely recommend, no matter what someone else tells you, you should shoot first. The second mentor I have in mind was more recently at Amazon. Same thing in a way. I had a boss come in a reorganization. This happens a lot. And Han did shoot first. That is absolutely right. And that's from the chat. So I had a boss come in, and he told me pretty honestly, hey, I wasn't really looking to have your group. I'm not sure I want to manage. I was running a technology group, but you're here and I'm here and we'll figure it out. So that is not an auspicious beginning. But I appreciated the honesty. And so I started working with him of, hey, how can I help you? How can I make your job easy? And I've talked before on other streams, the virtue of working with a manager to make their job easier, and that will incent them to invest in you. So again, over about a 3-year period, he really became an advocate and took my career forward in a way I wouldn't have been able to do without his backing. And some of that was he taught me. Some of that was he guided me how to navigate a large corporation. And my payback for that was explicitly focusing on what helped make his job easier. I'll cover one more example, a third mentor, and someone who's not a boss, never been a boss. And that's someone I have on the stream sometimes. He's on as Life Coach 724 when he's here. I know he's under the weather tonight, so he may not be on the stream. But Life Coach 724 is on the stream in part because he's been my coach and mentor, helping me improve myself for about 20 years. I met him obviously decades ago. We formed a relationship, and he has a degree in psychology and really was very good at understanding me for who I am, mostly, by the way, my flaws and weaknesses. And so whenever I screw something up, I go to him and say, I'm really struggling with this. I made a mistake. And he takes me through it. Now, why does he do that? I don't pay him. We're friends. But I think in part, he enjoys a puzzle. He may chime in here any moment and say, that's not why. We'll learn why if he's on. But we're both students of the mind, and he's investing in helping me improve my mind and improve how I work. And I think he enjoys having somebody who actually responds to it that he can fiddle with. So when you're working with a mentor, the point here is the best mentors are getting something out of the relationship. So when you think about how to get a great mentor, which is the topic I sort of said I would talk about tonight, and we will get to, if you really want a mentor to invest in you, there's got to be something in it for them. Because if they're just doing it to be a great person, they will do a certain amount, but they're not going to be deeply invested. And I think the best mentorship relationships come from having that relationship. So with that in mind, I see some people have put in questions. I appreciate the first question that's here at the top, which came from the audience. I encourage all of you to please go into the question widget, either on the web or here on Twitch. If you're watching on a web page, you can see the extension with Ask a New Question, and you can enter and vote. You can either enter a new question or you can upvote existing questions to make sure we address them. There's only a couple questions with more than one vote, so by all means, if you go vote, you have a good chance of getting what you want to know answered. With that in mind, I'm going to start with this question. I work in a small subsidiary of a large corporation. When is it appropriate to request mentorship from someone at the parent company? So my view of this is anytime you want. But more specifically, the reason to do that is, do you have something you want to know or something you want to improve as an employee in your career that more appropriately comes from the larger company? So for example, if you need to work with the parent company a lot and you want someone who can give you the perspective of how does the parent company think, how do they operate, how are they different than my subsidiary context, I think that's a great time to ask. When I wouldn't ask is often subsidiaries are remote. I wouldn't ask inside the parent company if it was something I could better get locally, because being in person with people can be a real help. Hello, Sings for You. Good to see you here. Thank you for watching. Um, so, uh, I think it's important to use local people when you can, just because it's so much easier to relate and build a relationship in person. Now, if your subsidiary is in the same town, or you have access, or you travel frequently to the parent company, that's a great time to go ahead and take advantage of that. But if they're remote, I'd only do it for the things I need there. So before we go on to the next question, I would say, let me talk a little bit about the differences between mentors, sponsors, and coaches. Define the terms, if you will. So we talk here about mentors. And one of the things about being a mentor is mentors are normally know you and are working on your career from a career viewpoint, whereas coach can mean all kinds of things. You can have a life coach that's trying to help you find work-life balance. You can have a parental coach. At one point in my life, I had actually a men's issue coach who is like trying to help me be a better husband and father. And we were talking about things, challenges and problems unique to the male role in society. That's coaching. Coaching is more about specific problems. Mentorship is more about longitudinal career growth. So then, what's a sponsor? Well, sponsor takes things a step further. Sponsor is really another word for advocate. A sponsor is someone who puts you forward for opportunities. So they're not just interested in improving your skills or building your abilities. They're also actually trying to push you into new opportunities, sponsor you for advancement. And this concept has come up a lot in the women's movement in the workplace, of how, because in many cases there's evidence that suggests that women are less aggressive in pushing for promotion or in pushing for projects and advancement, that for them in particular, having a sponsor who will put them forward or recommend them can be a huge difference in what they're doing. So we popped the question to the top about, why am I the easy coach and not the easy mentor? In this context, because I don't know you each personally and I don't know your career, coaches can offer advice or ask leading questions that may help you figure out where you fit in and what you should work on. To be a mentor, I really need to get to know your specific problems as opposed to simply asking you challenging questions. So, to that point, asking you a challenging question, if you're listening to this stream, do you have a formal mentor? Do you have a sponsor or a coach? When would you use them, and how do you get them? How would you get a sponsor who's going to put you up for opportunities? And I would say, to get such a sponsor, you probably need to earn it, because the sponsor is putting their reputation on the line for you. And so you need someone who's going to do that for you. If you want a sponsor, how are you going to build that trust and that relationship where you can make the ask and say, hey, if you see an opportunity like this, would you put me forward? Now, I would say, for a sponsor, it generally needs to be a more senior person. Not always, but they need to be in those rooms and those conversations where you're not, where they see those opportunities and they can make them happen. So that's a little bit about mentors, sponsorships, and coaching. Let me go ahead and drop down to this great question: what makes a good mentor? Super simple. I'll talk both about what I think makes a good mentor and what I think doesn't matter. And I have some notes here I may refer to, because I recently did a talk about what makes a good mentor. And so The most basic thing I would say in a mentor, and this is going to sound simple, is you need someone who cares. You can get someone to say yes to being your mentor, but if they've never really invested in mentorship, or they don't care and they're just doing it because they were asked to, either by you because of social pressure, or they were told, well, you should mentor some people, it's not the right person. Even if they have a great position, you need someone who cares about doing mentorship well. And if they have no expectations of you, if they just want to show up and have coffee with you and like, sure, we'll get together, we'll talk, you may get some value out of that. But I consider that a coffee buddy, not a real mentor. A mentor is invested in and thinking about how to improve your performance and your abilities. Okay, let's see. The next thing about a mentor is they have to either have the time or make the time. I've said this in other contexts, but I'll repeat it here. If you're a mentor, if your mentor has a lot of time, you should wonder why a little bit. Usually the best mentors are busy professionals who are working hard. And then you have to ask, why are they going to take the time to really invest in you? And so you're looking for someone that you can form that relationship with, where maybe you're giving them some value, but also they're passionate enough that they're going to take their personal time and invest it in you. And so how do you find such a person? Well, number one, truthfully, look for people who are mentoring others. Number two, look for people you share something in common with or some kind of bond. And number three, try to figure out what they want out of the relationship. Why are they going to mentor? Now, there's a lot of reasons that could be. They could want to show off their skill. It can be a way for them to feel like, oh, look, I'm an expert. I'm appreciated for my expertise. It could be mutual, where you're giving them something of value. I've had great symbiotic relationships with a number of people, both above me and on my team, where I invest in them and they teach me something. So I would say the last thing that makes a great mentor is they need to have a skill you're actually looking for. Don't just go looking for a mentor like, oh, I should have a mentor. The key prompt I would ask you, the key question I would give you is, what do you want to be mentored on? What are you interested in learning? Make sure the person can teach that. There's a case where I went out to get a specific skill from a mentor. I found the mentor who is an expert in that given skill. Unfortunately, she was not really good at sharing it with me. And so we had a lot of great talks, but I never really learned the skill. So I did half the equation right, which is find the expert in the skill, and half the equation wrong, which is find someone who is really invested in teaching it. I won't say she didn't try. I just say it didn't work. Maybe that was me. I wasn't able to learn it in the way she could share it. But when that mentorship ended, I didn't feel that bad about it. And probably, I'm guessing, she didn't either, because we weren't connecting. So what isn't needed in a mentor? And it's a short list. I said a sponsor probably needs to be higher level, in a superior position or a position different than yours that gives them view into different opportunities. But for a mentor, you can actually get good mentorship from someone who's simply better at your target skill. So there's a frequent guest here, for example, who's a designer. He's a UX designer. And I know nothing about UX design. The truth is, I struggle to draw a straight line using a ruler. So design is completely not my forte, but I can learn a lot from him on what makes good design and why, just by watching his thinking. Which brings me to a point. You don't always have to ask a mentor to be a mentor. You can just work with someone and ask them a few questions and study what they're doing. You don't necessarily ever have to make the formal ask of, will you be my mentor? You can just learn along the way. So that's a few things about mentorship I'd love to share. So we have a great question here. I think someone's gotten an early start on Ask Me Anything, but that's great because we want to mix some of that in tonight. So I'll go ahead and take this. Question is, I believe change management is hard to drive, gulp, and every leader's role should lead into change agent. As a mentor, how do I justify myself to make sure I help my mentee to be a change agent and not just a leader? Okay, so I didn't see the word mentor until halfway through this long question. It's a great question. So I believe change management is hard to drive. As a mentor, how do I justify myself to make sure I help my mentee to be a change agent and not just a leader? First, you've been asked to be the mentor. So one thing, if that's important to you, is you can just choose to make that part of your mentorship. In other words, to say, well, when I mentor, I believe everyone needs to be an effective change agent. That's going to be a part of our mentorship. Are you up for that? In other words, someone asks you, you get to set some of the terms. Now, there's all the joking terms like, I'm going to need my car washed every Tuesday. Probably not a good mentorship term. But you can absolutely, if you're being asked to mentor, set the requirements. When I take someone on as a mentee, which I don't do very much now because I point people to this stream and teach through this as a mechanism. But when I take someone on, I tell them up front, there's going to be homework. And I expect you to drive the discussions. Funny story that happens to me relatively frequently is in my past, people will come to me and say, hey, Ethan, will you be my mentor? And I'll say, sure. What do you want? And we'll work through what they want. And then they come and they show up in my office and they really don't have any questions. And it becomes clear to me that what they have in mind is that I'm magical. And they just want me to do the mentor thing and magically make them better. And they're looking for me to do all the work, which maybe from a very early in their career person might be appropriate. But if you really have time with a serious mentor, a well-placed person, someone with a lot more experience, how you behave reflects what they think of you. And you need to be investing in and driving that conversation. So to this point, I think being a change agent is very important. Every leader's role should lead into change agent. I agree with that. Maybe sometime we'll do a show on managing change. And in fact, in the not too distant future, we're going to put out a survey through the Easy Coach website on what topics the audience would like to see more broadly. And so if that's when you see that come out, if you're listening or if you're seeing this later on YouTube or on a podcast, look up our survey on the website and give us some feedback about topics you'd like us to cover. But we could talk about what it means to be a change agent. Actually, the bookshelf behind me here that's got a lot of my favorite books on it has the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, which is a book essentially on managing and leading change. And if you want to be a really effective change agent, that's not a bad book. But if I wanted to put that in my mentorship, what I would do is tell people that was important and then show them that, among other things, if you're going to improve under mentorship, you're going to have to change some things. That's the nature. And so that's one place where you can demonstrate being a change agent. You can also give them homework or challenge them. How are you going to go make a change? We've talked about this topic today, whatever it is the person wanted to learn, from how they interview to how they ask questions. I was recently mentoring someone on our experimental hike. He wanted to know, did he talk too much, essentially, or was he too aggressive in his presentation and his interaction with others to where he wasn't letting them be heard? So we talked about it. A question I could have asked him, though, is what are you going to do differently? And how are you going to change the environment around you? I can't go into everything involved in being a change agent, but the bottom line of my answer here is make it part of the mentorship, make it a condition, make it an expectation. So, awesome. That was a good question. Thank you so much for whoever asked it. We have some other questions here in the question widget. Yes, thank you, Chalupa Whale. Easy coach with magic powers. That's right. I wish I had them. People do truly sometimes expect it. So we're going to jump down. Please feel free to vote on questions, though, in the widget. It's very helpful. How do you get really great mentors, the famous or busy people, to respond to you and invest in you? So this is something I've thought about a lot. Number one, make the ask. Like nothing ventured, nothing gained. But number two, make a specific ask. So it's one thing, let's say I wanted to reach out because I work at Amazon to Jeff Bezos and ask him for mentorship. That would be an extremely hard ask because he's so busy. He's running this very large company, something like 600,000 employees. But if I wanted to make that ask, I would reach out and say, Jeff, I really want to learn this specific thing you do well. Could you meet with me once or twice to tell me about that? And the two things I'd be trying to do there is, number one, limit the apparent commitment. If the two meetings go really well, I can always ask, can I follow up later? Or could we have a third meeting or whatever? But second, I've made a very specific ask in a context where he's the expert. And so what you're trying to do is convey, only you can teach me this, and you're the best person, and I will value it, and here's how I'm going to use it. So if I really wanted to get quite a famous person or a very busy person to invest in me, the way I would go about it is make the burden light, make the ask very specific, and make the case for why they need to do it, why they're the best person to teach it. Now, I've not, to be honest, ever asked Jeff to mentor me, not because I'm afraid to, but because I think with his amount of time, it might not be the best investment of his time unless I had something I could only get from him. But I think you can target people and ask them for a meeting or two or three, and that's a much easier ask. All right. I see some more questions down at the bottom, so that's great. There's a big flow of them. Let's go ahead. Once you have a mentor, how do you get the most out of the relationship? This I covered earlier and we'll cover quickly. The thing you do here is you drive the meetings. You drive the meetings in order to make sure you get value out of them. So for example, at Amazon, I have a coach paid for by the company that's helping me improve my executive leadership. She's fantastic. Her name is Sue. It's Mariposa Leadership. She's not listed on our website right now, but Sue Bathanis at Mariposa is fantastic, and her whole company is. But I come to every meeting with an agenda of the topics I want to cover, the advice I'm looking for, the tools I hope to get from it. Basically, once you have that resource, whether it's a paid coach or a mentor, someone investing in you, serve it to them on a silver platter. That's why, in a sense, I love these. And I'm always saying on the stream, please ask questions. I can either stand up here and try and envision what to tell you, and I do some of that. I prepare, and I think about the topics. But the best thing for me is to respond to what you want to know. And so that's where you're super helpful to me when there's questions. So ask questions, come prepared. That's how you get the most out of it. And speaking of that, any pointers, next question here, any pointers on how to successfully enroll for mentorship over online channels? What can be key motivators for online coaches and mentors? Well, I don't know who wrote this, but you're really helping me out in this sense. Um, we're going to run a little experiment on the Easy Coach tomorrow at 8 Pacific, where I'm actually going to coach an individual online on the stream one-on-one. So I actually won't be here on the stage. I'll be in a different streaming setup, and I'll have someone in remote over video conference technology. And I'll be using that as a way to do one-on-one coaching. So why? Well, in that case, I want to experiment with that format and see if others can learn from it. Because we're going to be doing it in public, it'll end up on YouTube, it'll be a podcast. I know people enjoy this content and learn from it. What I want to see is, can they learn from listening to deep coaching of someone I'm interacting with? So as opposed to just going through Q&A in a one-way format like this, can people learn? That's a little bit tangential to this, but it touches on the topic. To enroll a mentor over online channel, key motivator. First, why does anyone mentor? Well, they may feel a sense of obligation, either professionally or to you personally. But really, you're generally asking a mentor about something they know well and they're passionate about. And a lot of people, not all, a lot of people love to share their passion. So I think whether you call it ego or whether you're just, we've all had those conversations where we innocently ask someone, hey, what are you drinking? And you get a 10-minute lecture on their opinion of the magnificent healing qualities of hibiscus tea, or how they drink 200 ounces of water a day, or how this is their favorite wine. The point is, we've all had that situation where intentionally or not, we've tripped over someone's passion topic and they talk and talk and talk about it. I think most mentors want to invest in others and they also want to share their expertise. And I don't think online takes anything away from that. I think people online want to share that expertise. The thing you can do online that's different is I sometimes mentor people purely in email. There's someone who's a big fan of the show. She's on the East Coast, and I've been helping her out entirely through LinkedIn messages. Now, she used to work for me 15 years ago, so I have some context about her abilities and her challenges and her, her current career challenges she shared with me. But the point is, we do everything just in short messages because she can explain things in a couple paragraphs and I can go back with suggestions. Now, you're not going to do super deep mentoring only that way, but same thing. I mentioned my long-term mentor, David Valencia, has been mentoring me for 20 years. He's also on the East Coast. So sometimes I call him, but I've also written him huge emails that give him context so that the call is quick and efficient. So I would say key motivators for online coaches and mentors, for their motivation, I believe it's probably their passion. They want to share their expertise. For how to do it, realize you can use other formats. And so that thing where I said, hey, if I wanted to get mentorship from Jeff Bezos, would I ask a question? Maybe, but I would certainly email him. Email him a question is a lot easier because he can just respond to it when he wants to. And I think that works well in the online format. Here in chat, Chalupa Whale says it may even be a better medium in some regards. You don't have to worry about folks being in the same place, same time. Exactly. That's exactly what I meant when I say I write a long email when I can to my coach, because it's normally in my evening. And for someone on the East Coast, he's already long in bed. But then he gets it and he can respond to me the next morning or whenever convenient. So I think take advantage of that asynchronous nature. All the time I tell people, hey, I don't have a chance to mentor you, but if you have a key quick question, I can probably answer it in email because that's just easier for me. All right. So now we have a big one. So, dropping to the next question, I feel like a lot of outcomes related to coaching or mentoring falls on the initiative of the person being coached or mentored. What are some mechanisms to ensure that when you seek out these coaches and mentors, you're able to follow through and get the most out of it? Yeah, great question. First, I completely agree with you. Um, so, couldn't agree more that a lot of it does fall on the coach or mentor. Now, ideally, you're working with a coach or mentor who has some skin in the game and wants to help, wants to invest. But when you seek out a coach or mentor, let's see, I just want to make sure I get the question right. When you seek out these coaches or mentors, you're able to follow through. What are some mechanisms? First, make sure you're in a position to have the time. If you're at a super busy stage of life, I'm going to go a little bit into the next question accidentally, which is fine. You have to be in the right stage of life where you can invest. If you're on a super hard project, if you have something personal going on in your life where you can't put in the time and take on something extra, it's the wrong time to have a serious mentor relationship. Now, if it's an informal mentor relationship with someone who's a friend or a colleague or a former boss, those don't have the same formality and they can be paused. You can say, look, can we pick this up in 3 months? But I guess I would say don't seek out a mentor until you're ready to drive that follow-up. So my number one mechanism would be ask if you have the time. And second, ask if you want a mentor. My current boss at Amazon, I doubt if he's ever had a formal mentor. I haven't asked him, but he likes to do things himself and he likes to learn on the job and by trying it himself. And he certainly has friends and people he relies on for advice, but I think a formal mentoring relationship is not a fit for him. And so I don't think he would invest in that, though I may be wrong. Now, tomorrow I'm going to have to go ask and find out. But the key is, I think you have to be ready. You have to be in a place to invest and you have to want to. If you're getting mentorship in something you don't really care about, but like you were told to, that's probably not going to work. You have to have the motivation yourself. You want to try and find somebody who's motivated to share it, but you really need to be committed or interested. And if you're not, I would worry about why. So that's one mechanism. Another mechanism's, I don't know how you run your life. I'm calendar driven. So if I don't have an appointment to plan for something, or if I don't have a task list or a to-do list or some sort of follow-ups, you got to give yourself the follow-ups. A mentorship, and this is going to be disappointing to some people, is just like any other project at work. You got to treat it like a project. It's got to have goals. It's got to have a calendar. It's got to have some sort of measurement. It's got to have all the if you want the most out of it. Now, again, if you want to hang out with a friend, even a friend who gives you some advice and have coffee chats or beer chats, go ahead. That's fantastic too. It's just not the type of active, aggressive mentorship I'm talking about. And when I do these shows, I'm speaking to people who really want to invest in their careers and try to accelerate their trajectory. Have all the good friends you want who give you advice over coffee, and that's a fantastic way to get extra perspectives. But for formal mentorship, you really need to adjust. Okay, next question here, which I started to touch on. My boss keeps insisting I should have a mentor, but doesn't say why. Does everyone need a mentor? That's a great question. And I think I just answered it. No, not everyone needs to have a mentor. I think mentors are great. And I think if you have the personality to learn from others in that kind of coaching setting or that advice, but I was just talking to someone who said, the honest truth is I learn the hard way. I go do stuff, and if it fails and it's painful, then I decide how to not have that consequence again. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, so you're saying you can't learn from others. You only learn by screwing it up yourself first. And he said, well, there are certain circumstances, like I don't eat things that are supposed to be poisonous because the risk is too high. But generally, if I haven't tried it myself, I need to do that. So to this question, which I think is a great and super honest question, you should not have a mentor because your boss tells you should. I would try and ask your boss, why do you keep saying this? What is it you feel a mentor is going to do for me that I'm not getting or that I will get? And I would think about that. If you have another way to get that need met or another way to address your boss's perception, because I'm taking from this here that your boss is trying to help. And so, what's your boss trying to accomplish? Get to that root problem. And if you can learn that some other way, you don't need a mentor. And I would say, as someone who mentors a lot, please don't come and ask me or anyone else to mentor simply because you've been told to. It's a terrible reason. You have to, so don't have a mentor. Don't have a mentor if that's not how you learn. And don't have a mentor if you don't want one. And don't have a mentor if you're not into it. Yeah, Chalupa Whale, great point. Thank you for chiming in chat. We love it when people add things in chat. Does the boss have suggestions on who it should be? I would totally want to know that. I'd also want to know, do they have suggestions about what you're supposed to learn? Look, just like there are some people who want mentors because they've heard it's good for them, there's some bosses that are kind of under pressure to make sure they're getting everyone mentorship and they're offering everyone a mentor. And it's generally good advice, but I say learn how you can learn. And if mentorship isn't how you improve in your life, do something else. Read a book, take a class, take an extra challenging project, do a side project. You don't need a mentor. All right. What is the most challenging direct question someone you mentored has asked? Wow. Great question. And always fun, right? These are the what stories can I share? I remember someone who really pissed me off. And I've shared this with him. He knows. Because he later came back to work for me. Years later. So I had someone sign up to be mentored like they wanted a long-term mentorship. They scheduled one meeting, came to the meeting, and asked me what they needed to do to get promoted to the next level. And it was with pretty much, I feel, a chip on his shoulder, like, I haven't been promoted. Why am I being neglected? I'm overdue. And I gave them my best advice in this sort of somewhat adversarial, like, yes, help me, but also justify to me how I'm right or why I haven't been promoted. Like, confirm to me my anger or at least my frustration. And then the thing that was tough is I really invested for that hour and I never heard from him again. He went away like, oh, that was great. That was so helpful, blah, blah, blah. And I never heard from him again. And the funny thing is, until like 2 or 3 years later, when he applied for a job in my team and the manager who worked for me said, oh, I have this new application from John Jones, not his real name, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know John Jones. And so but I want to do the right thing. This is a good story. As opposed to just saying like that, Dratter, I have no interest in ever working with him. He's unreliable. I said, well, I need to talk to him. I really need to understand something because number one, he had very strong feelings at that time. And I wanted to make sure those feelings weren't going to leak through in our work environment. And number two, I wanted to talk to him about having bailed on a commitment, what I saw as a commitment anyway. So the happy part of this story is we worked it out and he came to work for me and he was very successful in that role. And he ultimately got his promotion, although much later than I think he originally believed he should have it when working somewhere else. So trying to remember quickly, what was the most challenging or direct question? That's one. I wouldn't say maybe as a result of the fact now I have a high position at Amazon as a VP. People don't normally come and put me on the spot super hard. Um, I've been asked some hard questions about diversity and diversity in teams that are tough to answer because, as we know, diversity is a challenging topic, and most tech workplaces aren't where they aspire to be on that front. So that's something we're always working through. And when someone asks me, what support do you have for a person coming from a different background? Uh, the fact is, I can give them my best honest answer, but what I can't do is magically make the world a completely equitable and inclusive space. That goes back to Chalupa Whale's chat message from 20, 30 minutes ago about magic powers. I don't have the magic powers. And so I guess the hardest questions are when I'm asked about things I can't answer, partly because the answer is impossible, right? There's the old sort of bad joke of have you stopped beating your wife, which the answer is, well, no, I don't. Like, I haven't. Like, there's no good answer. It presupposes that you're doing something you don't do. Some questions that are impossible for anyone to answer are like that. And I have been asked a couple for which there's really no good answer. So, all right. Let's see. Next question here is great. I have a mentor to help navigating it. I have a mentor to help navigate a challenging relationship with my boss. Now that things that settled a bit with my boss, it is unreasonable to switch tack with my mentor and ask for support in finding a new role? No, I don't think so. If you've worked through the issue with your boss, and you're on a good situation, I actually think that's a great time to ask a mentor. Because if you go to a mentor like, well, I don't like my boss, can you help me get out? That puts them in a really rough situation. Or I'm having trouble with my boss, can you help me get out? They're not mentoring at that point. They're helping you with a job search. It's different. But if you've actually put in the work, that's a great point where you can say, hey, I took your advice, or together we implemented a plan. It's working better with my manager, but now I'm ready for a new opportunity and I'd like a clean start and I'd like that upward mobility and I'd like sort of whatever your reasons are. I think you're in a much better place to get your mentor to help you find a new role when they have confidence that you're willing to invest and work on your challenging relationships and that you don't run away from problems. So whoever asked this, thank you for the question. I think this is where you may have earned some sponsorship, where they actually start to become a sponsor. Because if what you're saying is true and the results are there, that you've really settled things down and improved them, or been stuck it out even. Let's say you didn't do anything except grit your teeth and wait and do your job, which is not a terrible strategy sometimes. You've shown value, and that's where you get sponsorship, is you've shown something that they can recommend. So I think that's a great time, or at least a good time. I would absolutely, make your change professionally. Don't stiff your old boss. Leave on good terms if you can. Give reasonable notice. These are all basic courtesies. But yeah, if you have a chance and you're ready for a career change, I would also say, depending on the relationship with the boss, you should consider if there's opportunities in place because you've invested in that relationship and it's improved. Is there an opportunity there? But otherwise, it's a great time. It's a great time to ask. All right. Open forum question. Cool. We're right at the end. We'll do the open forums. This is a great transition. This is the last question we have showing. If anybody else wants to add one or two more before we run out of time, we'll go to Ask Me Anything. And that may result in the hardest question I've been asked. Who knows? Open forum question. Since you're a former CS graduate who's climbed the leadership ladder with tremendous velocity, well, thank you. What are your tricks of the trade for techies, techno-functional people to make a career in technical program management? So this is pretty specific, but I'm happy to offer it. We have someone in chat who put in a question there. If you can move it to the widget following the directions that just got posted, that would be fantastic. But otherwise, we'd love to see it appear in the widget that's on screen or through the link that was just put up while I answer this other question. So, how do you become a TPM? Well, I have to be honest here. I was wired to do it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But then we'll talk about how you can be wired to do it. I was wired to do it because I'm a very organized, methodical person. And I found that planning other people's activities, which is part of what a program manager does, and anticipating contingencies was kind of my bread and butter. But the tricks of the trade, the technical program manager role, as I see it, when I describe it, is dev managers, they build things, they know how to get something built. Product managers are all the way over on what to build. The TPM is focused on when and exactly how it's going to be built, not how technically so much as how logistically. So this is all about logistics. It's all about the logistics, in my opinion. So you have to change from I'm going to code, I'm going to build systems, to I'm going to get products built by understanding all the dependencies and laying them out and managing them. Answering this slightly more generally, though, I think for engineers, and I'm including CS graduates, logical, systematic thinking, every skill I've learned, I've realized I've learned by having some analogy back to engineering. So when you have a big technical problem, what do as a programmer? You decompose it. We've all been taught functional decomposition, logical decomposition. What's the underlying data structure? What are the operators? To me, making a career in technical program management is just functional decomposition. We have this goal, this program we want to operate, this product we want to ship. How do I decompose that into the constituent parts? And then what are the dependencies among them? That's essentially, in a sense, what functions are calling each other, right? What parts of the code are using what other parts? What dependencies do you have between the modules? It's a little bit dehumanizing, and I don't mean to do that, because I'm not saying everyone on your team that you're managing or that you're influencing under program management is a module that you can just give inputs to and expect outputs from. Humans are notoriously unreliable if that's what you do. But if you want to make that change, you got to treat people like people. Thank you, Racine. I see the cheer. Really appreciate that. We mentioned that everything that comes to the channel goes to our expenses, and then after that, we'll go to the Washington Trails Association, a local trails charity here in Washington, where I'm on the board of directors. So I think you can find an analogy, and I just look, then I apply my programming skills. Like, oh, I understand how to decompose this programming problem into a set of programming skills. Now I just apply them. So you can abstract out from that and learn it different ways. But I would say take the skills you're good at and you've honed and apply them to the new problem and figure out how you have to modify them. So great question. Thank you. We'll go to the next question. So this is the one that came in through chat, got cross-posted here. That's fantastic. Someone else cheered, Think Pad Thai. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate you guys chiming in with the bits. Some of you probably know I built the bits product on Twitch along with my team. Worked with some great people a few years ago to do that. No one needs to cheer, but I really appreciate it. The acknowledgement of the value, because I love to do this, but I love to hear from you all. So when the people around you are feeling that the product or service which you're working on has little to no potential, what is the best way to motivate them as a peer employee? Thank you again, Think Pad Thai. So we lost the screen up here, Dave. So Awesome Dave's going to fix the screen. But you've asked a really hard question. How do you motivate people? I've been in that situation where the team didn't see the path forward for the product. And honestly, I didn't always see the path forward. This is tough. You're really getting at what motivates people, period. So a temporary motivation, not long lasting, can be to appeal to someone's professionalism. This is your job. You have this job. You need to do it. Like, you should do it well. You should have pride in your own performance. So a short-term way to motivate someone is essentially different variations of asking the gut up. And I think that's good as a tactic. Second, product or service which you're working on has little to no potential. That's a sad situation. Nothing is going to work long-term unless you change that. So if the product or service you're working on has little to no potential, number one, it's eventually going to get shut down, assuming you're right. But number two, you have to change that. And we'll talk about that a little bit. The other motivation you can give someone, though, is maybe they're getting something personal out of the role. So to be honest, I've seen cases, oh, thank you, Chalupa Whale. That's really nice. Easy Coach with the magic and knowledge bombs this evening. Well, that's high praise, but I'm definitely enjoying sharing what I know. And I love the bits train we have going. So that's fantastic. Much appreciated. Best way to motivate, they may be getting something out of it personally. So I have seen people who join a project that's going poorly or that doesn't seem to have a ton of potential. And what they do is, but it's a big job for them, or it's a chance for upward motion for them, or a chance to learn a new language or a new skill. And so they're like, honestly, yeah, this project may not be going anywhere, but I'm getting a ton out of it. Now, I wouldn't encourage anyone to be a complete vampire and be like, hey, so this company I'm with, it's kind of circling the drain and I'm doing nothing really to stop it from circling the drain and it's going to go down the drain. But boy, am I getting paid, or boy, am I milking them for their college scholarships or their college reimbursement. That's shitty, and I never advise be shitty. But what I do want to say is there can be trade-offs where I'm going to work in this boring area or in this area that I'm not sure is going to catch fire because it's got good upward mobility, because it's teaching me a new language, a new skill. And part of that, to be really candid, is if the product or service has little to no potential, there will be some people leaving, and that can make opportunity for you to take on bigger responsibility. Fundamentally, though, and I want to be honest about this, I want to be honest that you should invest in trying to fix the problem, if you can. And I don't want to be unrealistic, but you're an owner. We're going to have a talk soon about ownership in a lot of ways. And if you're an owner of your mission and of your career, you really, and an owner in your company, you really got to find some way to make that product or service have more potential. Another talk, and I keep listing more talks we need to do, is on invention and innovation. And you can invent your way out of it. Hopefully your company welcomes it or they're open to it and you can propose new things. But you can find some way to invent what you need done. invent a way to make that product or service have some potential. 2 last points about that. If it has no potential, go ask why other people believe in it. Like, why is it there? Is it a legacy thing they're not willing to shut down? I can't go through all the reasons, but find out why. See if you agree with them or if you can change them. And then the last thing is, if all this fails, get the hell out. Gonna be very honest. If you're like on a dead end service, you have peers that are not motivated. I told you some ways to motivate the peers. One of the things I meant to say is you make it so it has potential and that will motivate them. But if they're not motivated and it really is dead end, I have seen a couple people really train wreck their careers by staying too long in a job that was dead end, and not getting out when the getting was good, or even when the getting was bad. They didn't have a better option in hand, maybe, but there are times if it's really grim, just get out. And I'm not saying quit early, and I'm not saying don't motivate your peers. I love this question from Fuji. It was fantastic. But there is a time where it's time to cut bait and not be the last person off the sinking ship. And why do I say that? You only have one ride around on this rock. You only have one life as far as we know. Maybe we have some viewers who are into reincarnation, but even then, I'd be worried about coming back as the cockroach on the next ride. You only have one chance. Make it count. And life is too short to spend too long on this if you can't change the situation. All right, next question there. What are some good ways to get your skip level who is not technical to understand some aspects of the technical job that's very complex? Great question. A lot of times he sees the finished house, but not what it took to get there. Well, this is a tough one, but fun. How do you explain technology to a non-technical boss? Or anyone non-technical for that matter. Number one, you've got to get them interested somehow. If they don't care to know, it can be really tough. A frustrating thing for me, and probably though she hasn't chimed in tonight, my wife is probably watching. There are times where I'm really excited to share something, and I will ask my wife, I'll say, how can I'm excited about this thing. Can I tell you about it? Do you want to know? And then I realize she doesn't really want to know. And I've asked her a couple times, I really want to tell you how this thing works. Do you care at all? And she'll say, no, actually, I don't. And sometimes you just got to know when to shut up. In this case of some good ways to get your skip level to understand, you got to figure out if they want to. And then you've got to get them hooked on that thing. Chalupa Whale, thank you, by the way, for this advice. We're probably going to go to just chatting next week or the week after. So that's a really good point. We've talked about going there before. We wanted to make sure we had the show format down and nailed before we jumped in to a more public approach. And we get a lot of our viewership downstream in YouTube and podcasts, which I'll mention we have. So finishing up on this one, though, once I have their interest, you got to hook your boss somehow. This is good for your job. This protects you from being caught like you don't know. This can help you because you'll be smarter. You got to find some hook to get them interested. Then I personally teach through analogy. I compare it to something they know. I said in the last question that Fuji asked, I think it was Fuji, that if you're coming from a CS background, how do you learn something else? You apply the skills you have. I try to figure out what they do understand and compare it to something they understand. So if they're a finance person, I try and compare it to finances. If they're in another place, if they're whatever their background is, I try and put it in their words in their place. Oh, and thank you, Guniash, for another big cheer. Will Twitch open a Pittsburgh office? Well, I don't answer Twitch questions here, but I see the crying. I think Twitch is asking the question, where else should they go? Well, I know they are. They're looking at where else they could put offices. I won't talk more about that except to say, hey, they're looking for it. So it looks like, yeah, our chat here just showed somebody who's asking an inappropriate question. We're going to delete it from chat. So moving on, we don't need people in chat who just are trolling, so they're not going to be welcome. And we have great moderators, including Awesome Dave here behind the keyboard, who will get rid of anybody who's here just to disrupt. So you got to get them interested and then explain by analogy. The other way to explain for tech folks, very honestly, is draw. Pictures are worth many tens of thousands of they're worth tens of thousands of words when it comes to technology. And keep asking, do you understand? What more would you like to know? How can I explain this? Follow up that way, but really whiteboard. Same way you would explain to a peer, only easier. Be sure not to talk down. Last thing is, you're probably dealing with someone who's very smart and very motivated, I hope, but not technical. Don't talk down to them. All right, cool. Last question we'll take for tonight. Just so we don't go too long, we have this last great question here. I'm relatively senior in a small subsidiary of a large company. Would you recommend reaching out to potential mentors at a parent company? So we had a variation of this earlier this evening, so you'll need to go back if you missed that and watch the tape, or maybe this was a follow-on question. If you're relatively senior in a small subsidiary of a large company, I would say absolutely go out and ask, absolutely go out and get a mentor in the large company. If you're senior, and I think that's completely appropriate, I would recommend reaching out to mentors at the parent company. They can help you better understand how to navigate the parent company, what the parent company's culture is, what it's looking for. If you're senior in a role like that, I would definitely reach across the lines. And I would even consider over time having a couple different mentors to get different perspectives, because one person's perspective on your subsidiary may be different from another's. So I highly recommend that. I think that's fantastic. And if you can see them in person some, or build that relationship that way, or invest in what you do there, what you, if you can invest in that relationship with some travel, any of that, I firmly recommend that. And I think it's fantastic. You should definitely take advantage of that in order to understand the parent company. So with that, I have a couple quick announcements. We'll call it a night. Number one, I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a special bonus session tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Pacific. I know that's going to be late for people on the East Coast. It will eventually come out on video, but we're going to have someone in live who's got some questions for me. We're going to do a one-on-one coaching session online for quite a while. We'll probably go a full hour. That'll let you see deep coaching in action, and hopefully people in the future will learn from his specific questions. And then number two, next week we have a huge topic coming up on the show. We picked the topic we think many people will be eager to hear about. We're going to talk about how to negotiate comp and salary, and how to do that in a way that will get you paid more, and how to do it both inside a workplace and when you're entering a new job. It's not always easy, and it doesn't mean you can get anything you want, but we're going to talk about, from a boss's position, from an executive's position, what can you do there that will get you considered, and as much as maybe your company has the ability to give. And if you're going into a new job, how do you learn about that? And how do you get the best deal you can out of a new company? So there's a couple great things there. And I love it. People have started the bits war. Well, I hope to see you tomorrow if you can drop by at 8. We're not going to publicize that one too much because it's a new experiment. And then next week, we're going to have about the show about salary and compensation, which I think will be a big audience. And so with that, we'll call it a night. Thank you all so much. Thank you to the people who supported with bits, all the people who asked questions, and looking forward to seeing you both tomorrow and next week. Good night.